A dying mother, her face a mask of fierce love and unbearable pain, walked into a judge's chambers holding the hands of her two small children. Her husband and his mistress watched from the side, their eyes gleaming with greed, already counting the fortune they would inherit. But what happened next was not a quiet surrender. It was a final, defiant act of a mother protecting her young. In a move that stunned everyone, she entrusted her children not to family, but to the law itself. And when her last will and testament was read, the mistress's triumphant smirk dissolved into a shattering scream of disbelief, a scream that echoed the collapse of her wicked plans and exposed a secret that would destroy everyone who had wronged this dying woman. Catherine Davenport lived in a world that shimmered with the illusion of perfection. The Davenport estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a sprawling testament to generations of wealth, its manicured lawns rolling down to the placid waters of the Long Island Sound. From the outside, she was the enviable matriarch of a perfect family, a handsome, charismatic husband, Gregory and their beautiful 5-year-old twins, Leo and Lily. But inside the cold stone walls of the mansion, the shimmer was fading, replaced by the chilling reality of a life slowly, inexorably ending. The diagnosis had been a sledgehammer blow a year prior, an aggressive, inoperable form of pancreatic cancer. The doctors, with their somber eyes and gentle platitudes, had spoken of managing the time she had left. For Catherine, it wasn't about managing time, it was about weaponizing it. Catherine was not born a Davenport. She had been Catherine Miller, the daughter of a brilliant software engineer who had instilled in her a sharp mind and an unyielding will. She had built her own tech company from the ground up, a revolutionary data security firm called Aegis, which she later sold for a fortune that dwarfed even the Davenports' old money. She had married Gregory for what she thought was love, a whirlwind romance with a man whose charm could captivate any room. She soon learned, however, that his charm was a veneer for a profound weakness of character and an insatiable appetite for the very wealth she had created. Her illness had accelerated his moral decay. While Catherine endured grueling chemotherapy sessions that left her frail and ghost-like, Gregory's business trips became more frequent, his nights out longer. He would return home in the early hours, the faint, cloying scent of an unfamiliar perfume clinging to his expensive suits. He was kind to her, but it was the performative kindness one shows to a fragile, inconvenient object. His eyes, when they looked at her, were already measuring the dimensions of her coffin. The twins were her entire world. Leo, with his serious gaze and methodical way of building elaborate Lego castles, was her little architect. Lily, with her wild curls and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes, was her free spirit. They were the only pure, untainted things left in her gilded cage. As her body weakened, her maternal instinct sharpened into a primal, ferocious force. She saw the vultures circling, and the lead vulture had a name: Brenda Holloway. Brenda was Gregory's executive assistant, a woman whose ambition was as sharp and cold as her stiletto heels. Catherine had seen her at company galas, always hovering near Gregory, her hand lingering on his arm a second too long, her laughter a little too loud. Catherine, with the keen perception of the betrayed, knew instantly. She hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Peterson. The photos he delivered were clinical, brutal, and undeniable. Gregory and Brenda, entwined in hotel rooms, laughing over candlelit dinners, looking for all the world like a couple celebrating their future. A future to be built on Catherine's grave. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while the twins were napping under the watchful eye of their nanny, Mrs. Gable, Catherine sat in her study, the damning photos spread across her mahogany desk. She wasn't crying. The tears had long since dried up, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. She looked at a photo of Gregory and Brenda clinking champagne glasses on a yacht. The caption on the investigator's report noted the date, the same day Catherine had been told her cancer had metastasized. A wave of nausea, entirely unrelated to her chemotherapy, washed over her. It was the poison of betrayal, far more potent than any disease. She knew Gregory was waiting for her to die. She knew he and Brenda planned to seize control of her company, her assets, her entire legacy. But what they didn't understand was that they weren't dealing with a victim. They were dealing with a mother, and she would burn her entire world to the ground before she let those flames touch her children. She picked up the phone, her hands steady, and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "Judge Morrison, please," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Tell him it's Catherine Davenport. It's a matter of life and death, mostly death." Judge Robert Morrison was a man carved from oak and principle. His friendship with Catherine's family went back decades. He had held her as a baby and had watched her grow into a formidable woman. When he heard her voice on the phone, thin and strained but laced with that familiar steel, he agreed to meet her immediately, clearing his afternoon schedule without a second thought. They met not in his official chambers, but in the quiet, dusty library of his private club in Manhattan. The air smelled of old leather and history. Catherine, wrapped in a cashmere shawl that couldn't hide her skeletal frame, looked ethereal and out of place. She wasted no time on pleasantries. "Robert, I'm dying," she began, her voice flat. "The doctors give me 2 months, maybe 3 if I'm lucky. I've made my peace with that. What I haven't made my peace with is him." She slid Peterson's file across the polished table. Judge Morrison, his face impassive, opened it. He methodically looked at each photograph, his jaw tightening with every image of Gregory's infidelity. When he finished, he closed the folder gently, his silence more damning than any outburst could have been. "What do you need from me, Catherine?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "I need a guardian for my children," she said, the words catching in her throat. "Someone who cannot be bought, bribed, or manipulated. Someone who will protect them, not just physically, but financially. My will, my trust, it all has to be unassailable. Gregory and that woman, they will try to take everything." "You want me to be their legal guardian?" The judge was taken aback. "Catherine, that's highly unorthodox." "I know," she replied, leaning forward, a feverish light in her eyes. "But my children are my life's work. They are my masterpiece. I cannot leave their future in the hands of the man who celebrated my death sentence with his mistress. I am naming you, in your official and private capacity, as the sole executor of my estate and the sole trustee of the Davenport Children's Trust. And I am naming you as their legal guardian until they come of age." For the next 2 hours they planned. Catherine, with the same meticulous precision she had used to build her tech empire, laid out the blueprint of her posthumous war. She had already contacted her most trusted attorney, a shrewd, silver-haired man named Walter Abernathy. The 3 of them began to construct a fortress of legal documents around Leo and Lily. The plan was audacious. Catherine would liquidate certain assets secretly, funneling the cash into a newly created offshore holding company. She would restructure her primary company, Aegis, placing its controlling shares within a multi-layered trust. The trust's charter would be a work of art, filled with clauses and stipulations so complex and ironclad that only a seasoned jurist like Morrison could navigate them. Gregory's name was included, but only in ways that would give him the illusion of power. He would be a consultant to the board, with a stipend that was generous enough to keep him from immediate suspicion, but with zero actual voting power or control. "He'll be a ghost in his own life," Catherine whispered, a grim satisfaction in her voice. "He will have the lifestyle he craves, but none of the power. And every dollar he spends will be at the discretion of the trustee. At your discretion, Robert." The most critical part of the plan was the will itself. Mr. Abernathy was tasked with drafting a document that was a masterpiece of misdirection. The opening clauses would appear conventional, bequeathing personal effects and properties in a way that would placate Gregory, leading him and Brenda down a garden path of assumption. The true power of the will, the transfer of 99% of her liquid assets, her company shares, and her intellectual property into the trust, would be buried in dense legalese in the latter sections. "They must be completely confident," Catherine insisted. "On the day of the reading, I want them to be sitting there, smug and victorious. I want the fall to be as far as possible." As the days turned into weeks, Catherine operated like a ghost within her own home. She was a phantom CEO conducting secret video conferences with Abernathy and Morrison, signing documents with a trembling hand, her signature growing weaker with each passing day. She spent every other moment with her children, her heart breaking with every story she read, every hug she gave. She recorded video messages for them, for their birthdays, their graduations, their wedding days. She poured all the love she had left into these digital ghosts, ensuring that even in death, her voice would guide them. Mrs. Gable, the children's nanny and the only person in the house Catherine truly trusted, became her silent co-conspirator. She would witness signatures, fairy messages, and stand guard outside the study door, telling Gregory that Catherine was resting. The old woman saw the pain in Catherine's eyes, but she also saw the fire of a warrior preparing for her final battle. The end came faster than expected. One evening, as she was tucking Lily into bed, a sharp, searing pain shot through her abdomen. She collapsed. The hospital became her final battleground. Gregory was there, his face a perfect mask of husbandly concern, while Brenda hovered in the background of the waiting room like a vulture patient for the lion to fall. Lying in the sterile white bed, with the rhythmic beep of monitors as her only company, Catherine knew her time for planning was over. It was time for the final dramatic act. She called Mr. Abernathy. "Walter," she rasped into the phone, "it's time. File the petition for an emergency guardianship hearing. Get Gregory and his whore there. And bring the children from the house. I want Judge Morrison to see what he is fighting for." The venue was not a grand public courtroom, but Judge Morrison's private, mahogany-paneled chambers. It was a space usually reserved for sensitive deliberations, a room that felt heavy with the weight of difficult decisions. The air was thick with tension. On one side sat Gregory Davenport, impeccably dressed in a somber suit, his face a study in practiced grief. Beside him, a half-step back as if to feign propriety, was Brenda Holloway. She wore a severe black dress, but her eyes glittered with an ill-concealed avarice. They were flanked by their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Ms. Pierce, who looked as though she smelled blood in the water. On the other side, there was only Mr. Abernathy, his old leather briefcase resting on his lap, his expression grim and resolute. The heavy oak doors opened. What happened next silenced the room. Catherine Davenport walked in, not pushed in a wheelchair as everyone expected, but on her own 2 feet. She was supported by a stoic-looking nurse on one side and Mrs. Gable on the other, but she was walking. Her body was a fragile silhouette beneath a simple gray dress. Her skin was almost translucent, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made everyone, even Judge Morrison, sit up straighter. And she was not alone. Holding tightly to her hands were Leo and Lily. The children, dressed in their neatest clothes, looked around the imposing room with wide, uncertain eyes, sensing the gravity of the moment, but not understanding it. "Catherine, what is the meaning of this?" Gregory started, rising to his feet, his voice a blend of shock and indignation. "The children shouldn't be here. You should be in bed." Catherine ignored him, her gaze fixed solely on the man behind the large desk. "Robert," she said, her voice weak but clear, carrying across the silent room. "Thank you for seeing us." Judge Morrison nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course, Catherine. Please sit." Catherine slowly made her way to the chair opposite the judge, maneuvering the children so they stood before her. She never let go of their hands. "Your Honor," Miss Pierce began, her voice crisp and condescending, "while we have the deepest sympathy for Mrs. Davenport's condition, we must formally object to this theatrical display. My client, Mr. Davenport, is the children's father. The matter of their guardianship is self-evident. This hearing is unnecessary and is clearly the result of a mind unfortunately clouded by illness and medication." Mr. Abernathy rose slowly. "Your Honor, my client's mind is as sharp as it has ever been, perhaps sharper. She is here today to exercise her parental rights in the face of extraordinary circumstances." Catherine raised a trembling hand, silencing her lawyer. She looked at Gregory, then let her gaze drift to Brenda, holding it for a long, chilling moment. Brenda shifted uncomfortably, the first crack in her composure. Finally, Catherine looked back at the judge. "There are legal documents," she said, taking a breath. "A will, a trust. Mr. Abernathy will address those. But documents are just paper. I wanted you to see them. I wanted you to see what you are protecting." She gently pushed Leo and Lily forward a small step. "This is Leo. He wants to build cities when he grows up. He has his grandfather's mind." She squeezed his little hand. "And this is Lily. She has a heart big enough to heal the world. She has..." She has my hope. Tears welled in the eyes of the court stenographer. Even Ms. Pierce looked momentarily unsettled. They are my legacy, Robert, Catherine continued, her voice gaining strength. More than any company, more than any fortune. And I cannot, in good conscience, leave my legacy in the hands of a man who lacks the moral character to honor it. I cannot leave them with a man who would raise them alongside the woman he took to his bed while their mother was dying. A gasp went through the room. Gregory's face turned from ashen to furious. This is slander! Catherine, you're hysterical! Catherine's gaze was unwavering. Then in a gesture that was both heartbreaking and profoundly powerful, she let go of her children's hands and guided them toward the judge's desk. I am of sound mind and body. What's left of it, she declared, her voice ringing with authority. And I am formally, here and now, entrusting the care and guardianship of my children, Leo and Lily Davenport, to you, Judge Robert Morrison. She physically placed Leo's small hand and then Lily's onto the judge's desk, pushing them gently forward as if handing over the most precious artifacts in the world. The judge instinctively reached out, his large warm hands covering theirs. It was a transfer of trust, a sacred primal act that transcended any legal filing. They are yours now, Robert, Catherine whispered, her energy finally failing her. Protect them. She swayed and Mrs. Gable rushed to support her. This is an outrage, Miss Pierce shouted, finding her voice. A desperate, manipulative gesture by a dying woman. We will contest this with every legal means at our disposal. Judge Morrison looked down at the two small, frightened faces looking up at him. Then he looked at Catherine, a woman he had known his whole life, performing her last and most important act. His face, previously a mask of judicial impartiality, softened with a deep human sorrow and a newfound resolve. Noted, counselor, he said to Ms. Pierce, his voice dangerously calm. He then turned to Mr. Abernathy. I believe you have a document you wish to present to the court? Mrs. Davenport's last will and testament? Mr. Abernathy stood, placing his briefcase on the table and clicking it open. I do, Your Honor. I believe its contents will clarify my client's intentions beyond any doubt. Gregory and Brenda exchanged a look. It was a look of annoyance, but also of anticipation. Theatrics aside, this was the moment they had been waiting for. The moment the kingdom would officially become theirs. They settled back into their chairs, a palpable air of impending victory emanating from them. They had no idea they were not at a coronation, but an execution. Mr. Abernathy, his movements deliberate and slow, pulled a thick, cream-colored document from his briefcase. The room was so quiet that the rustle of the paper seemed to echo off the wood-paneled walls. Leo and Lily had been led to a quiet corner by Mrs. Gable, who shielded them from the palpable tension. This, Mr. Abernathy announced, his voice steady, is the last will and testament of Catherine Miller Davenport. Signed and witnessed 6 weeks ago. It revokes all previous wills. Gregory leaned forward, a feigned look of solemnity on his face that barely concealed his eagerness. Brenda sat poker straight, her knuckles white as she gripped her designer handbag. Mr. Abernathy began to read. I, Catherine Miller Davenport, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. He went through the preliminary bequests. To her loyal housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, Catherine left a generous lifetime annuity and ownership of the cottage she lived in on the estate grounds. A reward for her unwavering loyalty. A significant donation was made to the Cancer Research Institute that had treated her. Various personal effects, jewelry, art, were bequeathed to old friends and distant relatives. Gregory smirked. This was all as expected. The small items were being cleared away before the main event. To my husband, Gregory Davenport, Mr. Abernathy continued, pausing to look over his spectacles at him. Gregory sat up, his chest puffing out slightly. Brenda's lips curved into a triumphant smile. I bequeath our marital home, the Davenport estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, and all its furnishings for his use during his lifetime. A wave of relief washed over Gregory's face. He had the house, the symbol of it all. Furthermore, the lawyer read on, I direct my estate to provide Gregory with a personal stipend of $500,000 per year, adjusted for inflation, to ensure he may continue the lifestyle to which he has become accustomed. $500,000 a year. Brenda's smile widened. It wasn't the full fortune, but it was more than enough. It was a victory. She shot a venomous, triumphant glance towards the corner where Mrs. Gable stood with the children. They had won. This stipend and residency are, however, conditional, Mr. Abernathy added, his tone changing almost imperceptibly. Gregory's smile faltered. Conditional? On what? Mr. Abernathy continued reading from the will, Catherine's own words now a weapon from beyond the grave. Conditional upon his full and unwavering cooperation with the executor of my estate and the trustee of my children's affairs. Furthermore, these benefits are contingent upon a morality clause, detailed in Appendix A, which strictly prohibits cohabitation in the marital home with any non-familial partner for a period of 10 years. Brenda's face went rigid. The color drained from her cheeks. No cohabitation for 10 years. She would be his mistress in the shadows, not the queen of the manor. The house was a cage, not a castle. That's preposterous, Gregory sputtered, turning to his lawyer. You can't do that. Oh, but she could, Mr. Davenport, Abernathy said calmly before turning back to the will. But that is a minor point. Let us proceed to the primary assets of the estate. This was it, the main prize, the company, the billions in liquid assets. Gregory and Brenda leaned in, their temporary setback forgotten, their greed reignited. Regarding my company, Aegis Security, and all its shares, my investment portfolios, my cash holdings in all domestic and international accounts, and all intellectual property in my name, totaling an estimated value of $2.7 billion. The number hung in the air, obscene in its magnitude. Brenda was practically vibrating with anticipation. Mr. Abernathy took a slow, deliberate breath and looked directly at Brenda. I bequeath nothing. The word dropped into the silence like a stone. Nothing. Brenda blinked. What? That's a mistake. Read it again. There is no mistake, the lawyer said. He continued reading Catherine's words. I bequeath the entirety of my financial and business estate, without exception, to the Davenport Children's Trust. This trust is to be managed for the sole benefit of my beloved children, Leo and Lily Davenport. Gregory stared, dumbfounded. A trust? I'm their father. I'll be the trustee, obviously. No, Mr. Davenport, you will not, Abernathy stated coldly. The will is quite specific. He read the final devastating passage. The sole executor of my estate and the sole, irremovable trustee of the Davenport Children's Trust is to be the Honorable Judge Robert Morrison. He is granted absolute and total discretion over the management and disbursement of all funds. Mr. Davenport is explicitly and by name forbidden from holding any position of authority, trusteeship, or direct financial access to the trust. He is, in effect, a beneficiary of a small allowance, subject to the trustee's approval. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Gregory's face was a mask of disbelief, his mind struggling to process the scale of his dispossession. He hadn't just lost control, he had been rendered a powerless dependent, a pensioner living on an allowance granted by another man. But it was Brenda who finally broke. The reality crashed down upon her. The money, the power, the status, the company, the life she had schemed for and believed was hers. It had all vanished. It had been given to the two small children in the corner. She had been cheated, outmaneuvered by a dead woman. Her face, a carefully constructed facade of beauty and composure, twisted into a grotesque mask of pure rage. Her perfectly glossed lips peeled back from her teeth. No! The sound that ripped from her throat was not a word. It was a raw, animalistic shriek of fury and loss. It was the sound of a predator whose kill had been snatched away at the last second. The scream was so loud, so piercing, that Lily started to cry. That's not possible! She can't do that! Brenda screamed, lunging to her feet, her eyes wild. We had a deal! Gregory, tell them! We planned everything! In that one hysterical outburst, she admitted everything. The plotting, the conspiracy, the cold-blooded waiting for Catherine to die. Gregory's face went white with horror at her admission. Ms. Pierce buried her face in her hands. Brenda pointed a trembling, manicured finger at Mr. Abernathy. This is a fraud. She was sick. Her mind was gone. We'll fight this. We'll prove she was incompetent. That money belongs to Gregory. It belongs to us. Her tirade echoed in the stunned chamber. She had not only lost, but she had also exposed the rotten core of their entire enterprise in front of a judge, a court stenographer, and the very man who now held all the power. Judge Morrison, who had remained silent throughout, finally banged his gavel. The sound was like a crack of thunder. Enough, he boomed, his voice filling the room with an undeniable authority. Ms. Holloway, you will restrain yourself, or I will have you removed and held in contempt. The same goes for you, Mr. Davenport. Brenda stood panting, her chest heaving, her beautiful mask shattered, revealing the ugly greed beneath. Gregory sat, utterly broken, the magnificent future he had envisioned for himself reduced to ashes. Catherine was gone, but in that room, her will, her foresight, and her vengeance were terrifyingly alive, and her victory was absolute. The scream in Judge Morrison's chambers was only the opening salvo in a war that would quickly escalate from a legal dispute into a brutal, public spectacle. Gregory and Brenda, humiliated and enraged, were not about to surrender a multi-billion-dollar fortune. Guided by the ruthless Ms. Pierce, they launched an immediate vicious legal assault to contest Catherine's will. Their strategy was twofold and deeply ugly. First, they would argue that Catherine was not of sound mind when she signed the will. Second, they would petition to have Judge Morrison removed as trustee, citing a conflict of interest due to his long-standing friendship with Catherine's family. They aimed to paint a picture of a sick, delusional woman being manipulated by an opportunistic judge. The media, catching the scent of a scandal involving old money, new tech fortunes, and salacious accusations, descended like sharks. The story was a tabloid's dream. Dying Iris's shocking will. Father stripped of fortune. Judge accused of swaying dying woman. Photos of Gregory looking like a grieving husband, and Brenda, now styled as a loyal business partner, were plastered everywhere. Their legal team began a campaign of depositions designed to harass and intimidate. They called in Catherine's doctors, questioning them for hours about her medication, her psychological state, her moments of pain and confusion. They tried to twist every instance of chemotherapy-induced fatigue into evidence of mental incompetence. Ms. Pierce was a master of insinuation. Doctor, is it not true that high doses of opioids, such as those administered to Mrs. Davenport, can cause hallucinations and paranoia? She would ask, her voice dripping with false concern. But Catherine, the master strategist, had anticipated this. In the weeks before her death, she had undergone a full psychiatric evaluation with 2 independent, court-appointed psychiatrists. Mr. Abernathy had the sealed reports ready. Both concluded she was lucid, intelligent, and fully competent, demonstrating a remarkable clarity of purpose given her circumstances. Catherine had even filmed her sessions, looking directly into the camera and explaining her reasoning with chilling precision. When Mr. Abernathy presented this evidence, Ms. Pierce's first line of attack began to crumble. Their next target was Judge Morrison. They filed motions accusing him of unduly influencing Catherine, of using his position to seize control of a vast fortune. They hired private investigators to dig into his life, looking for any hint of scandal or financial impropriety they could use to disqualify him. They found nothing. Robert Morrison's life was as solid and unblemished as his judicial record. The real battle, however, was being fought in the court of public opinion. Brenda gave a tearful television interview, portraying herself as Catherine's misunderstood confidant. Catherine was a brilliant woman, but she was so ill, Brenda said, dabbing a perfectly dry eye with a tissue. She became so paranoid in the end, she pushed everyone away, especially Gregory, the man who loved her. All we want is to honor what Catherine really would have wanted before the illness took hold. This was when Mrs. Gable, the quiet, unassuming nanny, became Catherine's most powerful soldier. Mr. Abernathy called her to the witness stand during a preliminary hearing. The stout, gray-haired woman, dressed in a simple but dignified navy blue dress, was the picture of quiet strength. Ms. Pierce saw her as a simple servant, an easy target. She was wrong. Mrs. Gable, Miss Pierce began patronizingly. "You were in the house during Mrs. Davenport's final months. Would you describe her as isolated?" "Mrs. Davenport was focused," Mrs. Gable replied, her voice steady. "She was focused on her children. And her behavior, was it not erratic? Did she not have fits of crying? Moments of confusion?" "She had moments of pain," Mrs. Gable corrected her, her gaze like iron. "There is a difference. A body can be in pain while a mind is perfectly clear. I saw no confusion. I saw a mother preparing to protect her babies." Ms. Pierce paced before the witness box. "Did you ever see Mr. Davenport offer comfort to his wife?" "I saw him bring her tea that grew cold because he'd leave the room to take phone calls on the patio," Mrs. Gable said flatly. "I saw him tell her she looked tired and should rest, when what he meant was that he didn't want to look at her." The courtroom was silent. "And Ms. Holloway," Abernathy asked on redirect, his tone gentle, "did you ever see her at the house?" Mrs. Gable's eyes flashed. "I saw her once, about a month before the mistress passed. She came to the door with Mr. Davenport. He wanted to bring her in. Mrs. Davenport was upstairs having one of her bad days. I stood in the doorway and told him, 'Not in this house. Not while that woman is still breathing in it.' He was angry, but he left. Miss Holloway just looked at me, like I was an insect." But Mrs. Gable's most damning testimony was yet to come. "Ms. Pierce has suggested my client was not of sound mind when creating her will." "Mrs. Gable, you were a witness to the signing of that will, were you not?" Abernathy asked. "I was. And what did Mrs. Davenport say to you that day?" Mrs. Gable took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping over Gregory and Brenda, her expression one of profound contempt. "She looked at me after the last signature was done, and she smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen in months. And she said, 'They think they're playing checkers, Martha. They have no idea I'm playing chess. This isn't an ending. It's a strategic repositioning.'" The phrase "our strategic repositioning" was so uniquely Catherine, so perfectly her blend of corporate and personal resolve, that it struck a chord of truth in the room. It was the voice of the brilliant CEO, not a dying patient. But Gregory and Brenda were desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Believing they needed more leverage, a way to prove that Gregory was the only fit parent, they hired the same investigator Catherine had used, Peterson, to dig up dirt on Judge Morrison. What they didn't know was that Peterson's loyalty had been bought and paid for by Catherine long ago. He took Gregory's money and reported every one of their requests directly to Mr. Abernathy. Gregory, goaded by Brenda, told the investigator to find anything: a disgruntled former colleague, a hint of a past scandal, anything. Frustrated when Peterson found nothing, Gregory made a fatal error. "What about the kid's biological history?" Gregory asked Peterson in a recorded phone call, a call Peterson was making from Mr. Abernathy's office. "Maybe there's something there. Something about Catherine's past we can use to show she was unstable, a keeper of secrets. Dig into the fertility treatments they had years ago. Anything." When Mr. Abernathy heard that recording, a slow, grim smile spread across his face. Gregory had just handed him the key. He had just, in his arrogance and stupidity, opened a door that Catherine had sealed shut. A door that led to a secret so profound it would not only end the war, but annihilate their entire world. "Well, Mr. Davenport," Abernathy murmured to himself, switching off the recorder, "if you insist on digging, let's see what you find." The legal battle had reached a fever pitch. The tabloids were having a field day, and the case of the Davenport estate was the most talked about probate fight in the country. Ms. Pierce, sensing her incompetent argument was failing, pivoted. Her new strategy was to portray Gregory as the grieving, loving father whose natural, God-given right to raise his own children was being usurped by a manipulative judge. "We are no longer just arguing about money," she declared on the courthouse steps. "We are arguing for the sacred bond between a father and his children." It was this pivot that gave Mr. Abernathy the perfect opening. In the next hearing, as Ms. Pierce was delivering a passionate monologue about Gregory's paternal love, Abernathy rose to his feet. "Your Honor," he interrupted, his voice respectful but firm, "Mr. Davenport's counsel speaks eloquently about the sacred bond of fatherhood. We agree. This bond is paramount, which is why we feel, in the interest of absolute clarity and for the ultimate welfare of the children, we must address it directly. Judge Morrison, who was presiding over this particular hearing, another judge would be brought in for any hearings where his own guardianship was the topic, looked down at him. "Get to the point, Mr. Abernathy." "Certainly, Your Honor," Abernathy said, turning to face Gregory and Miss Pierce. Their expressions were ones of confusion. "My late client, Mrs. Davenport, was a woman of extraordinary foresight. She understood that a man's character could be tested and that his true nature would eventually reveal itself. She anticipated a day might come when Mr. Davenport's claim to her children would be used as a weapon to gain access to her fortune." A nervous murmur rippled through the courtroom. Gregory shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Therefore," Abernathy continued, his voice resonating with gravitas, "Catherine left one final directive, sealed and entrusted to me, to be opened only in the event that Mr. Davenport's paternal claim was used as the primary legal basis for contesting her will and the children's guardianship." He held up a sealed envelope. "Your Honor, we contest Mr. Davenport's standing in this matter. We contest it on the most fundamental grounds possible." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the silent room. "We contest it on the basis of paternity." The gasp in the courtroom was audible. Miss Pierce's jaw dropped. Gregory shot to his feet. "What the hell are you talking about? Those are my children. This is insane. She's trying to poison them against me from beyond the grave." "Is it insane, Mr. Davenport?" Abernathy asked, his voice cutting through the outburst. "Or is it simply a truth you were never meant to know?" "Your Honor, we formally request the court order a DNA test to confirm Mr. Davenport's paternity of the twins, Leo and Lily Davenport." The chaos was immediate. Ms. Pierce frantically tried to object, calling the move a disgusting, baseless, and defamatory stunt. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The presiding judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Carmichael, looked at the turmoil and then at the sealed envelope in Abernathy's hand. "Mr. Abernathy, you'd better have a very good reason for dropping this bomb in my courtroom," she warned. "I do, Your Honor," he replied, and he proceeded to read from Catherine's sealed letter. Catherine's voice, in the form of Abernathy's recitation, filled the room, calm, rational, and utterly devastating. "To whom it may concern," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means Gregory has done exactly as I predicted. He has used our children, my precious children, as pawns in his greedy game. He has wrapped himself in the flag of fatherhood to steal their birthright. It is therefore with a heavy heart, but a clear conscience, that I must reveal a truth to protect them. 5.5 years ago, after several years of trying to conceive, we sought help from a fertility clinic. It became clear that due to a combination of factors, our chances of conceiving together were almost zero. Gregory's pride was shattered. He became distant, angry. He refused to consider adoption or other avenues. He wanted a Davenport heir, a biological legacy. It was all about his ego. I knew I wanted to be a mother more than anything. I also knew our marriage was already fracturing under the weight of his narcissism. So I made a choice to protect my future children from a man I could no longer trust. In secret, I proceeded with in vitro fertilization using an anonymous donor. I let Gregory believe the successful procedure was the result of a new experimental protocol. He was so desperate to believe he was the potent patriarch that he never questioned it. He never asked to see a single medical file. His ego wouldn't allow it. Leo and Lily are my children. They are the product of my body, my will, and my profound desire for a family. They are not, in any biological sense, Gregory Davenport's. I did this not to deceive, but to protect. I knew even then that a man who loved only himself could never be a true father. This legal battle is the final proof. The letter ended, and a profound, shocked silence descended upon the courtroom. Gregory stood frozen, his face a horrifying collage of confusion, denial, and dawning comprehension. All the pieces were clicking into place. Catherine's secrecy around her doctor's appointments, her insistence on using a specific clinic far from home, the way she'd handled all the paperwork herself. He had been a fool, a proud, arrogant, willing fool. It's a lie, he whispered, but his voice lacked any conviction. A sick lie from a sick woman. Then you will have no objection to a simple paternity test, will you, Mr. Davenport? Mr. Abernathy said quietly. Ms. Pierce could see the case, the fortune, and her career-making victory all dissolving before her very eyes. There was no way to fight this. If they refused the test, they admitted guilt. If they took the test, and it came back negative, it was all over. Judge Carmichael looked at Gregory's shattered face. Her decision was swift. The court orders a DNA sample to be provided by Mr. Davenport and by the children, Leo and Lily Davenport, to be administered by a court-appointed lab. This hearing is adjourned until the results are available. Gregory stumbled back into his chair as if he'd been shot. He stared at his hands, the hands he always thought had created a legacy. Brenda Holloway, sitting behind him, looked at him with a new expression, not of love or support, but of utter, undisguised contempt. She had hitched her wagon to a fraud, a powerless, sterile fraud. The foundation of their entire world had just been obliterated by a ghost. The 2 weeks that followed the hearing were not a period of quiet, but of a deafening, suffocating silence. The legal world and the media held their collective breath, but inside the cold stone walls of the Davenport estate, time itself seemed to decay. For Gregory, each day was a slow, agonizing turn of a rack. He wandered the vast, echoing rooms, the silence broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall, a relentless countdown to his own oblivion. He tried to cling to a sliver of hope, a desperate, irrational belief that Catherine had faked the letter, that it was a final, cruel bluff. But in the lonely, sleepless nights, memories replayed in his mind, now cast in a horrifying new light. Catherine's quiet insistence on a specific fertility clinic across the state, her vague answers to his questions, the way she had handled every piece of medical paperwork herself, waving him off with a tired smile and saying, "Let me handle the details, darling. You just focus on us." He had seen it as the behavior of a stressed, hopeful wife. Now he saw the chilling precision of a master strategist laying the foundations of an impregnable fortress. Brenda's presence was a corrosive acid. The shared dream that had once bonded them had curdled into mutual contempt. She no longer saw him as a partner, but as a faulty investment. "What if it's true, Gregory?" she'd hissed at him one evening, her voice stripped of all its seductive warmth, leaving only the raw, metallic rasp of greed. They were in the grand library, a room where he'd once felt like a king, but now he felt like an imposter. "It's not true," he insisted, his voice hollow. "She's lying. It's a trick." "Is it?" Brenda's laugh was brittle, ugly. "Or were you just so blinded by your own damn ego, you never thought to ask a single question? You just assumed a Davenport heir would spring from your loins by divine right. You were a fool, Gregory, and I tied my future to a fool." She looked around the opulent room, her eyes scanning the leather-bound books and priceless art, not with admiration, but with the cold calculation of an auctioneer. Her inventory was coming up worthless. She was gone 2 days later, leaving behind nothing but the faint scent of her expensive perfume and a note on his pillow written on the hotel stationery. It contained only 2 words: "Good luck." The day of the final hearing was gray and oppressive, the sky a blanket of unwept tears. Gregory entered the courtroom looking like a ghost haunting the memory of a man. His bespoke suit, once a symbol of his power and status, now hung loosely on a frame diminished by stress and sleeplessness. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunk into shadowed hollows. He sat alone at the plaintiff's table. Ms. Pierce was there, but she kept a professional, sterile distance, her demeanor broadcasting that this was no longer a battle to be won, but a mess to be concluded. The courtroom was packed, a silent, ravenous audience of reporters and legal vultures waiting for the final kill. Judge Carmichael entered, her face an impassive mask. She wasted no time on ceremony. "I have the results from the court-appointed laboratory regarding the paternity of the minor children, Leo and Lily Davenport," she announced, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the thick tension. The report compares the DNA of the children to the sample provided by Mr. Gregory Davenport. Gregory felt a cold dread snake up his spine. He stared at the judge, at the single folder she held in her hands. His entire world, his past and his future, was contained in that simple manila folder. Judge Carmichael opened it. She did not look at him. She looked directly at the paper as if it were a simple, factual report on the weather. Based on the analysis, she read, each word a hammer blow, the probability of Mr. Davenport being the biological father of Leo Davenport is... She paused for a fraction of a second, a standard judicial cadence that felt like an eternity of torment to Gregory. 0%. A wave of sound washed through the room, a collective intake of breath, the frantic scribbling of pens, the soft clicks of cameras from the back. Gregory felt the air leave his lungs. 0. The word was so absolute, so final. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on his life. The judge continued, her voice unwavering. The probability of Mr. Davenport being the biological father of Lily Davenport is 0%. This time, there was no gasp. There was only a profound, damning silence. It was confirmation, the final nail. Ms. Pierce slowly, almost imperceptibly, closed her briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like a death knell. Gregory didn't hear the rest of Judge Carmichael's words as a coherent statement, but as a series of tolls from a distant bell, each one marking the end of something he once held dear. No biological claim, no legal standing to contest. Guardianship of Judge Robert Morrison is affirmed. The will of Catherine Davenport stands as written, and then the final crushing sound, the sharp crack of the gavel. This matter is closed. It was over. Everything was over. He didn't move. He simply sat there, a statue carved from ruin, staring at the empty space where his life used to be. The courtroom erupted around him. Reporters surged forward, a tide of bodies and shouting voices. Mr. Davenport, how do you feel? Was it all for the money? Did you ever suspect? Flashbulbs went off, blinding him, each flash searing the image of his public humiliation onto his soul. He was an object of pity and scorn, the great Gregory Davenport, reduced to the national fool. His social life evaporated not in days but in hours. The clubs, the boards, the friends, they all vanished as if they had never existed. He was a pariah. The mansion, his supposed prize, became his exquisite prison. The lifetime stipend was not a gift, but Catherine's final, perfect act of psychological torture. It was enough money to keep him trapped in the lifestyle he craved, but not enough to give him any power. He was a king with no subjects, a ghost rattling chains of his own making, forever bound to the mausoleum of a life built on a lie. Miles away, a new life was blooming. Judge Robert Morrison and his wife Sarah, a warm, steady woman with a gentle smile, had welcomed Leo and Lily into their home. It wasn't a mansion, but a sprawling, comfortable house filled with light, laughter, and the smell of baking bread. The transition from the cold, tense formality of the Davenport estate was a profound relief for the children. Here they could run in the grass, get dirt on their knees, and have pillow fights without fear of waking a fragile mother or disturbing a distant father. Judge Morrison, true to his word and his character, took his duties with solemn devotion. As trustee, he managed the multi-billion-dollar trust with meticulous integrity, shielding it from predators and ensuring it would grow for the children's future. But his true work was as their guardian. He taught Leo how to throw a baseball. He let Lily paint his face with watercolors. He and Sarah created a sanctuary of normalcy and unconditional love, the one thing Catherine's money could never buy. They continued to show the twins the video messages their mother had so lovingly prepared. On their 6th birthday, they watched Catherine on the screen, her face tired but her eyes full of light, singing happy birthday and telling them stories about when they were babies. They were too young to understand the complexities of what she had done, but they understood the love. Her voice, her presence, remained a guiding star in their lives. One sun-drenched Saturday afternoon a year later, Robert Morrison sat on his back porch, a glass of iced tea in his hand, watching the children. Leo was directing a line of toy soldiers across the lawn with the focused intensity of a general. while Lily was trying to teach their golden retriever how to dance, her laughter pealing through the summer air. They were happy, they were safe. Sarah came out and sat beside him, laying her hand on his. "She would be so proud, Robert," she said, her voice soft. He nodded, a lump forming in his throat as he looked at the vibrant, thriving children. He thought of Catherine, her courage, her intellect, her ferocious, unyielding love. She had fought a war from her deathbed and had won an absolute victory. She had understood that her husband's inheritance would be a hollow kingdom of ashes and regret. For her children, she had secured something far more valuable. Gregory Davenport had inherited a house. Leo and Lily had inherited a future. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a will or a fortune. It was a testament to the incredible, unstoppable power of a mother's love. Catherine Davenport, faced with the ultimate betrayal, didn't just get even. She got justice for her children in the most brilliant and permanent way possible. She proved that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the legacy of protection and love we leave behind for the ones who matter most. The downfall of Gregory and his mistress serves as a chilling reminder that greed is a hollow master, and integrity, even from beyond the grave, holds the ultimate power. What do you think of Catherine's master plan? Was her final secret justified? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of a mother's fierce love and ultimate victory moved you, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible real-life dramas. Thank you for listening.